3 months ago, the Portland Trail Blazers were one of the absolute best stories in the NBA. A young squad that literally nobody picked to make the postseason. Clawed their way in. Shocked the world by stealing a game from the Western Conference champion San Antonio Spurs. And had every single fan in Portland feeling great about their future. Look, making the postseason is definitely a nice step forward, but you cannot build a long-term franchise on moral victories. The Blazers front office knew that. So this offseason, they pushed all their chips in. They traded for a 2-time All-Star point guard, brought in a brand new head coach, welcomed back a returning franchise legend, and built a starting five that might be one of the most talented and unpredictable groups in the entire Western Conference. On paper, it looks incredible. But depending on who you ask, this team is either a house of cards, destined to collapse by January, or the absolute best rebuild in the league that nobody is watching. Now, we have to look closely at everything that changed, whether these new pieces actually fit together, and if this revamped Portland squad is ready to disrupt the entire Western Conference. Let's start with the massive trade that completely flipped the script. Because the first question on everyone's mind was incredibly simple. Does trading for Morant even make sense? Honestly, at first glance, not at all. When Blazers general manager Joe Cronin stepped up to the mic at his end-of-season press conference, he said the quiet part out loud. Portland desperately needed outside shooting all season long, and that lack of spacing killed them in the series against the Spurs. San Antonio packed the paint and basically dared Portland to beat them from the outside, and the Blazers simply could not make them pay consistently. Now, having Damian Lillard return from injury certainly helps. But Dame is in the final chapter of his career, and Portland's front office was looking way beyond next season. They had to plan for life after Dame too, which is exactly why trading for Morant seems so confusing on the surface. He doesn't fix Portland's glaring shooting issues. If anything, he's another ball-dominant player on a roster that already struggled with efficiency. But when you look at the actual price tag, it starts to make sense. Just a few years ago, the idea of Memphis trading Morant was absolutely unthinkable. He was their entire franchise. Fast forward 3 seasons and everything has changed. After a rough stretch of off-court issues, Morant's trade value completely cratered. By the time the real trade negotiations actually started, the biggest challenge was finding any front office willing to take a chance. That's exactly where Portland saw an opening. They did not have to gut their promising young core or hand over a massive mountain of first-round picks to get Morant for Jerami Grant and Chris Murray. But before we get too ahead of ourselves, let's be totally honest about what they surrendered. The centerpiece heading back to Memphis was forward Jerami Grant. Grant is coming off a solid year, averaging 18.6 points per game on 45% shooting and nearly 39% from deep, making him Portland's most reliable perimeter threat. But Grant is 31 now. As a defender, he has taken a step back, and even at 6'8", he is not a physical rebounder. His on-court production has been declining for a couple of seasons, while his massive contract remains locked in, meaning his salary vastly outweighs his actual impact. The other piece in this deal was forward Chris Murray, a guy who constantly flashes the exact physical tools that every NBA team wants from a high-level role player. He plays hard and does the dirty work that doesn't show up in the box score, but his offensive game never developed, and his defense alone could not lock down a spot in Portland's long-term plans. Now, looking at those two names, you would probably expect this package to include multiple first-round picks, but there weren't any. And that is exactly why this trade has the entire league buzzing. If Morant can return to his peak form, this could go down as the biggest steal of the offseason. After all, Morant is still only 26, with 7 seasons under his belt. He has averaged 22.4 points, 7.4 assists, and 4.6 rebounds. He is a 2-time All-Star. His raw talent was never the issue, but everything off the court unraveled. Starting in 2023, he faced multiple suspensions for displaying firearms on social media. Then came another suspension in 2025 after mimicking a gun celebration during an active game. Later that same year, Memphis suspended him again for conduct detrimental to the team after he clashed heavily with the coaching staff. To make matters worse, the injuries hit. Last season, a sprained UCL limited him to 20 games before he was shut down in January. Then, there is the shooting. Can you actually build a championship contender around a lead guard who cannot shoot consistently from beyond the arc? Morant's career high from deep was 34% back in 2022. Since then, he has hovered around 30, and last year's 23.5% was downright ugly. In the modern NBA, that is an incredibly tough profile to build around, especially for a 6'2" lead guard. Here is the thing. Players with Morant's raw ceiling do not hit the trade block very often. When he is fully healthy, he is still easily the most explosive guard in the sport, a dynamic force who collapses defenses every single time he attacks the paint. So, the entire trade comes down to one big question. Is the classic Morant from that 21 to 23 run still in there? If he is, Portland just pulled off an absolute heist. If he isn't, this whole thing falls apart fast. If he just stays healthy, there's no reason he can't return to being that 20.7 assist playmaker who dictates the entire tempo of an offense. Better yet, Portland didn't lock themselves into a corner. Morant's under contract for 2 more seasons. If he reaches All-Star level again, they can extend him. If he isn't, they let his contract run out or flip him before it expires. Low risk, massive upside. But pulling this off was the easy part. To make this roster click, Portland's going to have to make some tough decisions. And one of those moves might chip away at the chemistry that made last year's squad so fun to watch. To truly understand the biggest challenge facing this team, we have to look at a guy completely unrelated to the trade, Damian Lillard. Morant was the flashy addition, but Dame's homecoming might matter just as much. After sitting out all of last season with an injury, the greatest offensive threat in franchise history is finally back. Before going down, Lillard was still dropping 25 a night during his 24-25 run in Milwaukee. So Lillard's not walking back into Portland to be some spot-up shooter. He wants the ball, and that's where things get complicated. Last year, Portland's biggest headache was a lack of healthy playmakers. Constant injuries to Scoot Henderson, Drew Holiday, and Shaedon Sharpe left the backcourt completely empty. One offseason later, the script flipped completely. Now they have too many. Morant, Damian Lillard, Drew Holiday, Scoot Henderson, and Shaedon Sharpe. That is easily the most crowded backcourt in the league. It's also a locker room where there simply aren't enough minutes or starting roles to keep everyone happy. To unlock all this talent, the move is obvious. Start Morant and Lillard together. You've got 2 superstars who can create their own shot at will and completely control the game's tempo. But here is the massive catch. That small backcourt does nothing to fix Portland's spacing issues, and it might actually make things worse. On the defensive end, it completely derails the gritty identity that carried Portland into the playoffs last year. Let's take a quick timeout. Remember, only play if you've got the means and can keep it responsible. Today's episode is sponsored by Prize Picks, America's #1 daily fantasy sports app. We finally reached the World Cup final, and it's Argentina versus Spain. Messi is chasing his 2nd straight World Cup victory to lock up his undisputed GOAT status. On the other side, Lamine Yamal, the famous baby in the bathtub. My picks are Messi and Lamine Yamal, both going over on goals plus assists. Prize Picks also has a Messi promotional pick just for this final, over on 0.5 passes attempted by Messi. And the game is dead simple. You just choose more or less on a few stats and submit your entry. Prize Picks is available in most states, including California, Texas, and Florida. Use code HMA, play $5 and get $50 in bonus lineups. Check the link below and play responsibly. Now, back to it. Still, if Morant regains his all-star form, Portland gladly accepts that trade-off. Toumani Camara slides in at the 3 as one of the best defensive role players in the league. Plus, there's a guy who has quietly become a true franchise cornerstone, Deni Avdija, fresh off a breakout all-star year, giving you another front court playmaker after putting up 24.2 points, 6.9 rebounds, and 6.7 assists. Plus, Donovan Clingan holds down the paint. That's a seriously talented starting 5. Then look at their incredible bench. Drew Holiday, Scoot Henderson, Shaedon Sharpe, and Robert Williams. The raw talent is definitely not the issue here. Will it all fit together? Let's start with Dame. Lillard's 36 and coming off a torn Achilles. Even for a superstar of his caliber, there's no guarantee he returns as the same guy. But his elite shooting should definitely hold up. We got a perfect reminder of that last All-Star weekend during the three-point contest. His range was never the issue. It's everything else. Can he still create separation off the bounce? Can Portland actually ask him to carry the same heavy load he did during his first legendary run here? And even if the answer is yes, a much bigger problem looms, because now he's sharing the floor with Morant, another 6'2" guard who makes his living almost entirely on offense by themselves. Both players are easily talented enough to build an entire offense around, but together they recreate the exact defensive nightmare Portland spent years trying to escape. You can hide one small offense-first guard on defense, hiding two of them night after night. That's where things get ugly. On every single possession, Kamal Abdul-Kling and the rest of that front court would be constantly cleaning up messes at the point of attack. That's a brutal ask over 82 games, let alone a grueling playoff series. Look, we have all seen this movie before with Dame and CJ McCollum. It really felt like Joe Cronin had finally learned that lesson. Over the last few years, Portland quietly built around real length and athleticism and defensive versatility. You saw it against San Antonio. Sure, they lost 4-1, but that series was way closer than the final score says because they could actually guard. Now, by dropping Morant right in next to Lillard, Portland is risking a lot of that hard-earned progress. Yes, they still have elite defensive weapons in Kamal, Klingon, and Holiday, but a defense is only as good as its weakest link. And two small guards playing heavy minutes together is a massive weak link. As long as those two guards are sharing major minutes on the court, Portland's defensive ceiling probably isn't elite anymore. We all know exactly how that story usually ends in the postseason. So while this lineup should be one of the most explosive offensive groups in the West, it all comes with a massive bill attached. Whatever Portland gains on offense, they risk giving right back defensively. They have already run this experiment once. Lillard and CJ McCollum gave them years of truly great guard play, a bunch of regular season wins, and exactly one trip to the Western Conference Finals. But every single postseason, it fell apart the same way. The offense got him in the door, but the defense couldn't get him any further. Now, Portland is betting that swapping McCollum for Morant completely changes the ending. History says that won't be easy, which is a huge reason Deni Avdija is the most crucial piece on this roster. Last year, he carried a much heavier offensive load than anyone expected, and that took a toll on what he could give on defense. With Morant and Lillard handling the playmaking, Portland can let Avdija get back to what makes him special using his size and physicality to impact both ends. On paper, they can absolutely catch anybody. Whether the pieces truly click is a different question, and it's the one thing that will define Portland's entire season. But all of it, the talent, the fit, the upside, the worries, comes back to one guy. You can draw up a perfect roster on paper. If the locker room is disconnected and nobody buys into the same identity, none of it means a thing. Which is why the most critical move Portland made this summer might actually be hiring their new head coach. And after the year this franchise just endured, that hire really matters. Portland's coaching situation has been anything but steady. Chaney Billups' run ended abruptly after that gambling scandal hung over the entire organization, forcing the Blazers into a frantic coaching search at maybe the worst possible moment in their rebuild. Early on, Tiago Splitter looked like the frontrunner, but once Splitter took the Chicago job instead, the search came down to two names: Minnesota assistant Micah Nori and Boston assistant Tyler Lashbrook. In the end, Cronin and the front office went with Nori. This is his first real crack at being an NBA head coach. But do not confuse that with being green. By the time the 2026-27 season tips off, Nori will have spent almost 2 decades on NBA benches. He got his start in Toronto back in 2009, then bounced through Sacramento, Denver, and Detroit. Over the last 5 years, he became Chris Finch's lead assistant in Minnesota. Around the league, Nori has built one of the best reputations of any assistant coach out there. A sharp tactician, obsessive about the tiny details. And maybe most importantly for this specific job, he knows how to connect with people. Guys around the league have jokingly called him the Ted Lasso of the NBA for the energy he brings into a locker room. That is exactly what this Blazers team needs. Coaching here is not just about drawing up some plays. They also have to manage big egos and get both veterans and young guys to buy into the same vision at the same time. And relationship building is not his only strength. He can coach when the lights are brightest. In 2024, after Chris Finch hurt his knee, Nori stepped up to the sideline and helped guide Minnesota past the defending champion Denver Nuggets and into the Western Conference Finals. And that wasn't some fluke. Last January, Finch was out again right before matchup with the eventual West champion Spurs, and Nori took over. Minnesota fell behind 16-0, trailing by 19. But the Wolves fought all the way back to win 104-103. A single game doesn't make someone an elite coach, but moments like that are exactly why Nori is one of the most respected assistants in the league. And his philosophy might fit Portland even better than his resume. Over his 5 years in Minnesota, Nori helped Finch run a free-flowing offense built on quick decision-making and constant ball movement and players reading the defense on the fly. For a roster stacked with creative players, that makes a ton of sense. A system that spreads the playmaking responsibilities around could be exactly what they need to keep everyone involved. Now, Nori's deal is only one guaranteed year with 2 team options after that. That might sound like the front office is hedging its bets. It is all about urgency. Portland believes this roster can win right now, and Nori is already mapping out exactly how to get there. Last season, Portland led the league in turnovers and ranked near the very bottom in field goal percentage. Plus, they could not close, going just 21-2 in 2 possession finishes. Nori has flagged it all. He wants cleaner execution, smarter shot selection, spacing for Lillard, and a lethal 2-man game with Avdija. The coach even flew to South Carolina to meet Morant face-to-face, leaving convinced that he is locked in and fully bought into this next chapter. Now, though, comes the real test. Nori is taking over a highly delicate balancing act. A team built to win right now, but young enough to keep building. That is why, more than anyone else Portland brought in, Nori is the addition that will define this season either as the start of something real or just another talented squad that never clicked. So, where does that leave the Blazers? Honestly, they have a massive hill to climb. The West is not getting softer. Both San Antonio and Oklahoma City are fresh off deep runs, making them the targets. Right behind them are heavyweights like Denver, Minnesota, and Los Angeles. Squads anchored by 3 of the most dominant players alive: Luka Doncic, Nikola Jokic, and Anthony Edwards. Breaking into that elite tier will not happen overnight, but this offseason was still a win. The plan was never to turn the Blazers into immediate championship favorites. It was about raising their ceiling, taking a young playoff squad, and finding another gear. Clearly, this roster is not perfect. There are glaring weaknesses, tough questions, and plenty of major doubts. But they are also talented enough to be the league's most watchable team next season. So, when I tell you things have completely changed, I mean it completely. New star, returning legend, new head coach, and a totally different ceiling. This team has the raw talent to make life miserable for anyone in a 7-game series, but enough red flags to make any disaster scenario believable. Drop your thoughts below. How far can Portland go next season? And as always, if you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to like and subscribe for more, and I will see you in the next one.